Welcome everyone to Gamer Meld. Today I've got a lot to cover, starting with Sony raising PS5 prices, Intel doing a deep dive, A770 GPU comes in a Stargate, Nvidia confirms the RTX 4000 announcement, and Ryzen 7000 performance is here. But first I have a big announcement to make. The Gamer Meld notification squad is now Meld Alerts, and you can find it at meldalerts.com. For those who don't know, it's basically a free way to get notified when major new PC hardware is releasing. Possibly announcements for the new hardware, not sure if I'm going to do that, but definitely for the actual release. Because let's be honest, there's so many things coming out that I even get confused at times. So when you sign up at meldalerts.com, you get notified when they're actually released so you can buy your new part. Plus you'll get alerts on major PC hardware deals and more. But don't worry, I'm not going to send you any spam or anything like that, just the important stuff. And if you already signed up for the Gamer Meld notification squad, you don't have to sign up again, everything will switch over. If you haven't yet, what are you waiting for? Just sign up at meldalerts.com for free so you're never late again. Once again, that's meldalerts.com. Okay, it's news time, and first up for today, it looks like Sony is raising prices for their PlayStation 5. In fact, if we go down here, we can see that they're set to raise it by around 10%. Where, you might ask? Well, countries like Europe, UK, Canada, Australia, Mexico, Japan, pretty much everywhere. In fact, it looks like the only place it isn't going to be raised is in the US, though I'm not really sure if that helps anyone, given the fact that it's still really hard to find PS5s in the US now. You can see that they are still selling for well over MSRP, so to be honest, it doesn't really seem to matter. Still, the fact that Sony is actually raising prices really is annoying. According to them, they are doing it because of the global economic environment as well as high inflation rates. Basically, it's just more of what we've been seeing, higher prices across the board, or at least seemingly across the board, because Microsoft has officially announced that they won't be raising Xbox prices after Sony announced their PS5 price hike. So that is at least good news, but of course this is more or less just a marketing strategy just to say, hey, well, we're not going to do it, which, don't get me wrong, I'll give credit due where credit is due, but be on the lookout just in case they try to sneak in higher prices in the near future. And next up for today, Intel recently did a deep dive into their XeSS tech. For those who don't know, XeSS is Intel's version of DLSS and Fidelity FX Super Resolution, though it's far more similar to Nvidia's DLSS. The reason is because it actually uses artificial intelligence and specific cores in the actual GPU to do the upscaling. Either way, let's go over a little bit of what they discuss. First up, we can see that they show more of a traditional rendering pipeline, render, pre-effects, TAA, post-effects, tone map, then the UI and HUD. Well, XeSS effectively removes the TAA, puts XeSS there, which obviously makes sense. This doesn't really give us all that much detail, but the interesting part is that just like Nvidia and AMD, they are going to have different quality settings. As you can see here, we have native, then the ultra quality mode. So this right here is 46 FPS. Ultra quality mode brings it up to 57, then 69, 77, and as high as 87 FPS with performance. And just like the other upscaling techs, the difference between this is that the native starting resolution that they go from and then apply AI filters and things like that are starting at a lower resolution the higher you go up in performance. So let's say, just for reference, the performance is something like 720p, while ultra quality starts at like 1440p. I mean, it's almost certainly nothing like that, but just as an example, and they're basically all upscaled to 4K, so they do look somewhat similar, but obviously they're going to be worse the lower resolution you have, just because there's less of an original image to then build off of. Though of course the point of using AI is that it does a much better job of stitching things back together, because it goes through and learns the game effectively, so it does a better job of kind of stitching all of this back together to look more like a native 4K image, and therefore you can do lower resolution and it still look fairly similar. Before I move on, we do have some other images. You can see here native and then performance mode from 48 FPS to 92 FPS. from 4266. And when we look down here, actually you can see that it mentions that it delivers up to 2.11 times the performance. So pretty similar performance gains that we've seen compared to other tech. Then down here, we see more individual frame rate differences. You can see getting 1440p with XeSS's balance mode, the native one right here at 1 times, and you can see 26% faster, 30%, all the way up to 75% faster. And of course, that is balance mode, not performance. Over here is performance mode. And we can see the highest being Ghostwire Tokyo, 2.11 times. So definitely not bad, but of course these numbers are more or less irrelevant. We really want to see how well it looks. If it ends up looking like 1080p when it's supposed to be 4K, it doesn't matter if it gets twice the performance because it doesn't really help. And next up for today, just a really quick, fairly interesting story. Intel actually delivered in their ARC van a few A770 GPUs to PC builders. They're basically going to be designing systems, and I do believe they're going to be giving them away. Yes, you can see it right here. They're going to be doing it until September 30th. But the point of this video is actually one thing I personally found pretty interesting. You can see right here that they basically delivered the GPU in a Stargate. Now, whether this is what it's actually going to end up coming in the retail boxing, I'd be pretty surprised. But I do have to admit, that is really cool, especially if you're someone like me who actually grew up watching Stargate SG-1 with my father. We loved that show growing up, and just kind of interesting. The ARC logo obviously sort of looks like the Stargate. I mean, you know, the whole like wave that comes out of it and everything. It obviously doesn't have any of that. If you haven't seen the show, you have or movie or many iterations of the show, you have no clue what I'm talking about, but basically the box looks pretty cool. And next up for today, we have great news coming from Nvidia's CEO, and also a little bit of a confirmation on rumors that we've been seeing regarding current gen GPUs. But first, let's talk the next gen cards, their RTX 40 series, at least that's what it's been leaked to being called so far. As you can see right here, the CEO stated, quote, well, during, I will say, the Q2 results, the CEO stated, quote, Ampere is the most popular GPU we've ever created. It is in the top 15 most popular gaming GPUs on Steam, and it remains the best GPUs in the world, and it will be very successful for some time. However, we do have exciting new next generation coming, and it's going to be layered on top of that. And so we've done 2 things. We reduced sell-in to let channel inventory correct, and we've implemented programs with our partners to price position the products in the channel in preparation for our next generation. So that's quite a bit of a handful there, but for starters, what he's basically done is he's effectively confirmed a lot of the leaks that have said that current 3,000 cards, that basically there's way too many of them. That this is why we're seeing a pretty drastic price drop. I believe we heard a little while back that Nvidia effectively pushed off next gen cards release specifically because there's simply too many cards. They need to sell them before releasing next gen. But here, what he's basically saying is that they're going to be layered on top of that. And what that means likely is that they're going to be releasing their much higher end cards like the 4080 and 4090 before their lower end cards, so they can basically sell last gen's cards. They'll likely reduce the price significantly and try and sell those, given the newest cards are significantly faster. So those will obviously be a pretty big premium, but that way they can still sell their current gen cards rather than those just being end of life and things like that. Though they likely will become kind of end of life, but simply put, there's so much inventory that they're trying to sell that before releasing the more mid-range and lower-end cards. Now, the really big thing here is the fact that the CEO actually confirmed that their RTX 40 series are set to be revealed in September, specifically at the GTC Fall 2022, to which it was later announced that the CEO keynet for GTC is scheduled for September 20th. And lastly for today, we're finally beginning to see benchmarks on AMD's upcoming Ryzen 7000 CPUs. For those who don't know, for quite a while now, there's actually been a few Ryzen 7000 engineering samples that have appeared in the wild. Some are actually on sale, and effectively, this meant we were going to start seeing benchmarks soon, and we are now. Starting things off, we have the 7700X in Cinebench R20. As you can see right here, the 7700X got a fairly incredible single-core score of 773. And in fact, this completely crushed the Ryzen 9 5950X, 5800X, 5700X. Wasn't even close, except it did actually lose to the currently leaked next-gen 13700K, which got 814. Now, moving on to multi-core, we can see that it did fairly well compared to the 5800X. I believe it's like 20% faster, though it is significantly faster than the 5700X, or at least a little bit more from there, but it did significantly lose from the scores we've been seeing for the 13700K. But it doesn't stop there. When we move over, we actually have some Cinebench R23 scores, and we see fairly similar things here. We can see in the single core score, the 7600X actually did right at a similar score of the 12700K and 12600K, while the 7700X beat out both the 12700K and 600K and actually gets right at the 12900K. Though, when we look at the multi-core score, we do see things aren't that great. In fact, the 7600X loses to the 12600K, while the 7700K loses to the 12700K. Now, I'm not really sure why these are so poor, especially when we get up to what we're seeing with next gen. It's really not looking that great. But of course, remember, these are engineering samples, and especially when we look at one other benchmark. Wildly enough, in CPU-Z, the single core score of the 7950X got 780, while that's actually below the 12900K. Yet when we move back over here, we can see the 7700X actually gets right around the 12900K. Though of course this is Cinebench versus CPU-Z, but this is a pretty big difference. Yet when we go down here, we can see that the 7950X engineering sample actually got just barely just below the 13900K. And remember that the 13900K has significantly more cores than the 7950X. So this is a very odd disparity, and to be honest, what I feel could be going on is just that we're seeing terrible benchmarks either because of BIOS or something along those lines, and the reason is really just because the single core looks really good here and here, yet looks terrible here, yet the multi-core score looks amazing here, yet not so great in these. One really huge thing to think about is that if this actually ends up being significantly better, that will make the multi-core score significantly better as well. So if it really is underrating the single core score, it could be significantly underrating the multi-core score, meaning AMD's next gen, even though it has significantly fewer cores, could end up beating Intel's next gen. Of course, we'll have to wait and see, don't get too excited, but this is looking pretty wild. So while that does it for today, are you pumped for Ryzen 7000 or are you more ready for Intel's 13th gen? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please subscribe. And as always, have a great day.